Oh wow, I feel this in my bones. My uncle, Mom's brother, has had a farm in southeast WV since the 70s, long before I came into this world. Mom is the oldest of 5, and my uncle built a bunch of houses on the farm so family could use it whenever. Some lived there, and other, like my family, visited often. My mom and older sister and I would go for weeks on end to spend time with family, and I always loved it because I have a ton of cousins and was the baby for a long time, so mostly I tagged along with my cousins and felt extremely safe, like it was my happy place. I don't really remember anything totally out of the ordinary when I was really little, other than I remember an imaginary friend whom I exclusively played with at the farm, nowhere else, and we moved extensively for Dad's job, so I've lived in many different places. What I remember after age 5 was suddenly being old enough to not have to have someone walk me in from other houses, which I thought was so cool, so I used to explore. My uncles liked to bow hunt, and had taken me a few times not too far into the woods, so I was able to go back on my own and find their little tree platforms they had built to hunt from. I thought they were cool little tree houses. Your story sounds a lot like the very last time I ever took off by myself in the woods without another family member with me. It was the winter. I wanted to be out in the snow and explore, so I found my way up the mountain. That is what I called it, but in fact it was probably just a massive hill, and into the trees. I couldn't find the spot I was looking for and got pretty frustrated with my 8-year-old self, so I sat down by a creek to catch my breath and figure out where I was. I couldn't have been sitting more than about 3 minutes when something let out a scream I can only describe as blood-curdling. I thought it was a fox, most likely, until I heard another voice crying, just weeping and wailing, and the sorrow was palpable. My cousins had always told scary stories about Appalachia, and I figured that they had followed me into the woods and were trying to scare the pants off me for shots and giggles. I called out like, "Okay guys, not funny. Okay, I'm going home, enough," and followed my footprints in the snow as fast as I could back to the farm. The screaming and crying didn't stop, stayed consistent as I moved, which really made me convinced it had to be my cousins. I don't think I heard words, just crying and screaming, but it wasn't pleasant. Made my way back to the main house, my uncle's house, which was the biggest on the property and visible from the edge of the woods, and absolutely booked it, ran full tilt to get to the kitchen door. I remember getting through the door and slamming it behind me because I was a combo of terrified and annoyed that my cousins were playing a prank on me. The next closest cousin in age is 9 years older than me, and so I was often the butt of pranks. Well, wouldn't you know, every family member was accounted for in the living room/kitchen. The older male cousins and my uncles were in the kitchen putting their snow boots and coats on to come look for me. I had apparently been gone for several hours, and they were worried. According to my mom, I was white-faced. My hands were covered in scratches through my mittens. I guess I must have fallen or something. They were so worried I had disappeared. I should add, I set off from my aunt's to walk to my uncle's, and had decided to take a detour and didn't tell anyone. Oops. I was 8 and really didn't think about how that might be bad. Mom said I looked like I had seen a ghost. I asked if anyone had come out to the woods to look for me. They said no, we've been looking at the different houses and were just about to come look for you because they saw my footprints head into the woods. I told them about where I went and what I heard, and my uncle, whose property it was, said, "Oh shit, I think you probably ran into the witch." I'm over here thinking, oh, some crazy lady lives in the woods and I probably stumbled near her cottage. Nope. The witch was just what they called the unknown entity that roamed the woods, screaming, crying, mimicking people's voices, and just giving people a good old sense of doom and dread. No one had a straight answer about possible folklore or anything like that, but all my older cousins had their own experiences with similar happenings over the years. Scared the living daylights out of me. And while I've been back to the farm over the years, I can tell you I have never once set foot near the woods tree line, even as an adult. I was grateful my family didn't think I was crazy, but they said a general rule is not to be in the woods alone, so I listened. To my knowledge, nothing physical ever happened with anyone in this entity, more of a prankster than anything. But oof, The Appalachia has some wild stuff. I definitely remember some strange stuff happening during the week we had my aunt's funeral when I was 21, and random voices or red eyes or smoke apparitions on the wood's edge, but I never went to check them out after that one incident. I live in the heart of Appalachia, and this is easily the most terrifying story of one of my experiences. This story may be short, or it may be drawn out. I am recounting these events as I type, as it was honestly one of the most horrifying things I have experienced, and it brings me genuine stress to think about. This happened maybe 2-3 years ago. I live in southern West Virginia, and have for my entire life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with a friend, I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening, doing the usual things, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This is not a particularly long trail, but it is very dense in the woods that surround it, and it is easy to get freaked out when thinking of your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop, pack our joint, and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was strange and kind of eerie, but not alerting, as any sort of predatory animal in the area may cause a disturbance. We finish smoking and continue our walk when almost immediately the forest falls dead quiet, and as soon as the forest goes quiet, there is a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking humanoid voice, shaky and uncertain, almost like an old children's toy, like the ones with the crackly speakers and robotic voice, if you know what I mean. This immediately sets us off. We bolt directly down the opposite length of the trail, but the sound does not gain distance. It doesn't get closer, per se, but no matter how far we ran down the trail, this eerie voice remains the same volume, going over and over with no quieting or stopping. At this point, I am convinced that we are in genuine danger, something I have felt very few times. Finally, after sprinting for who knows how long, we exit the trail, grasping for breath and almost at the verge of tears of how frightening this was. We begin to exit the trail, and about 5 minutes from the exit, there is a bone-shaking, heart-stopping, murderous scream from directly behind us. I know what a mountain lion sounds like. This was not an animal. This was not someone playing or watching a movie. This scream sent birds flying from nests and made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most genuinely depraved and violent scream that I have ever heard. This is a true story that I have only told to maybe 3 people, all of whom seem to brush it off as false. I've never been a person to push for the existence of the paranormal or spiritual, but I genuinely believe I encountered something inhuman in those woods.
I survived one night in the Appalachians. It didn't end there. I wasn't supposed to be out there by myself. That's the part I've had to say out loud to people afterward, because otherwise people start filling in blanks for you. They turn it into a some brave, wholesome kid finds himself in nature thing, or they decide I was asking for it, or they laugh and call it a Blair Witch moment, like that's helpful. I'm 17. I had a driver's license, a job at a grocery store where I spent half my shift stacking canned beans and pretending not to hear grown men argue over scratch-off tickets, and I'd been hiking these mountains with my Uncle Wayne since I was in middle school, and I still wasn't supposed to be out there by myself. My mom was on a 12-hour shift at the hospital. My stepdad was doing one of his I'm gonna be in the garage moods, which meant he'd have a podcast blasting, and he'd be offended if anyone spoke to him. My Uncle Wayne was out of state for work. The one person who would have told me no, don't be an idiot, wasn't around. So I did what I'd been doing all summer, stacked my excuses in neat little piles, and tried to make them look like facts. I told myself it wasn't the backcountry. It was a trail I'd done before. I told myself I'd be in and set up before dark. I told myself bear spray was basically a cheat code. I I told myself my folding knife made me a person who could handle things. I even wrote a note on the kitchen counter in Sharpie on the back of a pizza coupon, like a kid sneaking out in a movie. Going camping. Back tomorrow. Love you. Like love you was a force field. The trailhead parking lot was half full. Dusty SUVs, a couple Subarus with stickers all over the back windows, and one minivan with a family unloading like they were moving in. I parked in the far corner like my car was embarrassing, which it was. There was a guy tightening his bootlaces on the tailgate of a truck. He nodded at me. I nodded back. That tiny thing made me feel safer than it should have. One bar of service blinked at the top of my phone, like it was doing me a favor. I put it on airplane mode anyway. Battery was something I could control, sort of. My pack was heavier than I'd pretended it would be. Cheap dome tent, old sleeping bag, stove, headlamp and backup flashlight, jerky and ramen, the silver emergency blanket Wayne insisted on. I had a squeaky water filter and a roll of duct tape. That was it. I locked my car twice. Habit, anxiety, something. The first mile was easy. Wide trail, packed down from use, little root steps in places, flat stones like a natural sidewalk. I passed a couple with trekking poles and matching sun hats. I passed a family with 2 kids arguing about trail mix. Normal sounds. Leaves shivering in a light breeze, a woodpecker somewhere hammering like someone knocking on a hollow door. After a while, the trail split. The main loop kept going, and the spur I wanted cut off and started climbing harder. The sign was sun-faded and a little crooked. Under it, nailed to the post, was a small rusted tag that said Trail Maintenance Crew 1987. Wayne had pointed it out the first time and said, "That tag's older than you, bud," like it was a joke. I stepped onto the spur, and the world changed in a way I can't explain without sounding dramatic. It wasn't like the light turned off or the temperature dropped 10 degrees. It was smaller, like when you walk into a room where people were talking and they stopped. The trail got narrower. Ferns crowded the edges and brushed my shins. I could still hear distant voices behind me for a bit. Then those faded too, and the mountains took over. A little past the split, there's a boulder that sits right off the left side of the trail, like someone rolled there on purpose. It's the size of a small car, and it has a white quartz seam running through it like a scar. Wayne used it as a marker. Once you pass Quartz Rock, it's just you and the ridge. I passed Quartz Rock, and that was exactly what it felt like. The climb wasn't horrible, but it was steady, the kind that makes you aware of your breathing and the sweat cooling on your back. Halfway up, I saw the first thing that made my stomach pinch. A deer trail crossed the path, plants bent in a narrow line, dirt darker where hooves had churned it up.
Except it wasn't just deer. There were prints that didn't make sense. Humanish smears, like someone had pressed the side of a shoe into the dirt and dragged. 2 of them, too close together. I crouched down, stared, stepped next to them. Not mine. I told myself it was old, softened by rain. Maybe someone slipped. Enough of a story that my brain latched onto it. Still, I stood up slower than I needed to and listened harder than I'd been listening. Not for bears, not for snakes, for footsteps. Nothing obvious, just the normal small noises that are supposed to be comforting. That day, they felt like camouflage. By mid-afternoon, I started feeling watched. Not in a poetic way, in a physical way, like the space behind me had weight. I tried to make it funny for myself. "Okay, Evan, congrats, you've invented anxiety." I even said it out loud. Hearing my own voice helped, until it didn't. On a switchback, I heard a low, wet sound, like someone clearing their throat with their mouth closed. It came from downhill to my right, close enough that I froze. I stood there with my hand half raised to push a branch away and listened so hard my ears hurt. Nothing. No follow-up movement, no animal scampering, just absence. I kept going because stopping felt worse. A while later, the trail cut through a stand of hemlocks. Everything got darker under them, light turning greenish and flat.
My headlamp bounced against my chest with each step. That watched feeling got worse, and I saw something that didn't fit. At shoulder height on a tree trunk, maybe 20 feet off the trail, the bark had been scraped away in a wide patch. Fresh, pale wood exposed. Sap glistened. Not bear marks, not vertical gouges. A sideways smear, like something leaned into it and rubbed. Probably nothing, I muttered. I didn't believe myself. Not fully. Wayne's campsite was near a stream where the spur trail drops off a little and you can hear the water before you see it. There's an old blaze mark on a tree, too. 2 faded yellow rectangles of paint, one over the other. Wayne had said, if you see the double yellow, you're almost there. When I saw the double yellow, relief hit me like a wave. The campsite was there, sort of. A patch of ground flatter than the rest, a few stones arranged like someone had started a fire ring at some point. The stream was a thin, clear ribbon running over rocks, making that steady hush sound that should have been calming. I dropped my pack and did the perimeter check like Wayne taught me. Look for dead branches overhead, scat, signs someone else is already there. No obvious animal sign, no footprints, but on the far edge of the clearing, the ferns were bent in a line, like something moved through there recently. A narrow lane into the trees. I stared at it long enough to feel stupid, then set up my tent fast anyway. Routine. Routine makes you feel like you're in control. I filtered water. The filter squeaked when I tightened it, same as always. I boiled ramen. I ate out of the pot. I hung my food bag the best I could, not perfect, but high enough that it made me feel better. The rope burned my hands. Dusk hit and the woods turned into a different place. Not haunted, just less readable. I brushed my teeth down by the stream. Mint paste, gritty water, spit into rocks. When I straightened up, I saw something on the opposite bank. A pile of stones. Not a neat cairn, more like someone dumped pale rocks in a clump. They weren't there earlier. I would have noticed. My headlamp caught them and made them look too bright. I stepped closer, and on the top stone there was a smear. Dark, wet-looking, brown, black. I didn't touch it. I swept my light across the tree line across from the pile and saw nothing, but the back of my neck went tight anyway. I went back to my tent quick, not running, but quick. Inside, I zipped the mesh door and sat on my sleeping pad with my shoes still on, headlamp on my forehead, bear spray by my thigh like a comfort object. I listened.
Stream, bugs, a faint owl call. Then, deeper in the trees, I heard that throat-clearing sound again. Low, wet, close. I told myself deer make weird sounds. Foxes scream like people. Nature is creepy. This was my brain getting dramatic because I was alone. Except it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like a person pretending to be one. I checked my phone. 9:03 p.m. 1 bar of service blinked. I tried to text my mom anyway. Hey, camp set up, all good. It didn't send. The little spinning icon just sat there. I turned the phone off, then back on, because seeing the screen made me feel less alone. I turned my headlamp off because I didn't want my tent glowing like a lantern. In the dark, the tent got smaller. The mesh was a black void. The world outside existed only as sound. Then, something snapped a branch near the edge of the clearing. Not a twig, a branch. Sharp crack. I froze so hard my shoulders hurt. Something brushed the side of the tent. Not a shove, a drag, like fingers testing the material. The nylon whispered. The wall dimpled inward an inch, then released. I raised the bear spray. My thumb found the safety. Right outside, something exhaled. Not a normal animal breath. A long, controlled breath, like someone sighing through their nose. Warm air hit the tent wall. I felt it through the fabric. I whispered, "Go away." Silence. Then movement retreating. No heavy footsteps, more like a whispering shuffle through leaves, toward the stream. A small clink followed, then another. Rock on rock, deliberate, with pauses,
Clink, clink, pause, clink. The stream changed tone, like something stepped into it carefully, not splashing, controlled. Then I heard my food line shift overhead, a faint creak like weight testing it. The rope squealed and the carabiner ticked. A gentle tug, another. Then the line went slack. A smaller snap up above, followed by a heavy thump in the leaves. My food bag hit the ground. Plastic crinkled. Jerky packets shifted. Something metallic rolled. Then that wet throat sound again, closer to satisfied now. It rooted through my stuff slowly, like it owned it. Careful, patient, not frantic like a bear, not noisy like a raccoon. Then it stopped. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I didn't decline. I watched it ring until it stopped.
Outside, somewhere in the trees, my ringtone sounded. Except it wasn't my phone. It was a thin, wrong imitation, like someone humming it through their teeth. Off key. The humming drifted and faded, like it was moving. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Then, right outside the tent, something said my name. Evan. Quiet, like someone calling from across a room. My throat locked. Evan, it said again, closer. Then, hey bud. Wayne's phrase. It sounded like Wayne in a voicemail, slightly muffled, like the voice was being pushed through something. And then it laughed. It tried to laugh like Wayne, but it came out too low and too wet, like a cough and a laugh got tangled. Footsteps started. Actual footsteps. Heavy. Bipedal. Slow. They crossed the clearing with pauses between steps, like it was listening between movements. It stopped right outside my tent. A sour, damp smell seeped through the fabric. Wet dog and old mushrooms and leaf rot. The tent wall dimpled inward again, higher this time, like something pressed its palm against it. Evan, it said, inches from my face through nylon. It exhaled, slow and warm. Then, in my mom's voice, baby. That hit something soft in my brain I didn't want touched. I made a sound, not a word, a small, involuntary whimper. The tent wall pressed in again. Baby, it said, open up. The words were right. The rhythm wasn't. My mom didn't talk like that. Then it started scraping along the zipper line, slow, like it was finding the weak point. The zipper teeth clicked under pressure. It paused. Tap, tap, tap. Knuckles on nylon. Evan, it said, and the voice changed. Older, rougher, gravel in a throat. Come out. I whispered, leave me alone. The tapping stopped. For 1 second, I thought maybe that mattered. Then the tent wall caved in. Not a clean tear, a full body shove. Poles snapped, fabric collapsed over me. I screamed, ugly and loud. I fired the bear spray blindly into the collapsing nylon, and the cloud blew back into my face. My eyes burned, my throat seized. I coughed so hard I gagged. Outside, something recoiled with a hissy choke, like air forced through something wet and narrow. I clawed my way out, half blinded, tears pouring down my cheeks. Cold night air hit my face. The clearing was a smear of darkness. My headlamp was inside the collapsed tent. My flashlight was in my pack. Something landed behind me. Heavy. Leaves exploded under the weight. I scrambled backward, hit a rock, fell hard onto my ass. Pain shot up my spine. A tall shape shifted between me and the trees. Too tall for a person. Not a bear on hind legs either. Wrong proportions. Wet glints caught starlight. Eyes like wet glass.
It made that throat sound again, angry now. My hands searched for the bear spray. Gone. My brain screamed, "Run!" I bolted toward the trail. I didn't grab my pack. My keys were in my pack back at the site, but the idea of a car felt like a story from someone else's life. All I had was direction. I ran uphill, because uphill meant ridge, and ridge meant the main trail, and the main trail meant other people. Behind me, it moved with that whispering shuffle, fast now, controlled. From somewhere ahead, I heard my own voice. Evan. My name, in my pitch, with my stupid nasal thing I hate in recordings. It came from up the trail. I skidded to a stop, lungs seizing. In the darkness ahead, a silhouette stood in the path, like a person, like a teen, like me. It lifted an arm slowly. "Evan," it said again, in my voice, and it sounded like it was smiling. My brain snapped into one clean thought. It's hurting you.
Using sound to stop you, to make you turn, to make you doubt. Behind me, leaves whispered. Something closed distance, so I crashed off the trail into the trees. Branches whipped my face, ferns grabbed my legs. I didn't care. The ground dropped. I half fell, half slid down a steep slope, catching myself on saplings and roots. My palms scraped. My knee slammed into something hard, and pain flared white. I kept going until I hit flatter ground, and the sound of water found me. The stream again. And I recognized the spot by something stupid. A dead log with orange survey tape caught on it, flapping. I'd noticed it earlier and thought, random. Seeing it made my stomach drop. I hadn't just run, I'd been angled. I splashed water on my face anyway, trying to wash pepper spray off, and drank without filtering because my brain didn't care anymore. Behind me, tap, tap, tap. Not on nylon, on wood. I turned and saw another scraped patch on a tree. Fresh, pale sapwood exposed. Shallow gouges in it, not words, just shapes that wanted to be something. A rough outline of a person, 2 long arms, 2 circles for eyes, a line for a mouth. It looked dumb. It still made me sick. Across the stream, something stepped into the water carefully. The sound changed around it. That sour smell drifted toward me again. From upstream, in that gravel voice, it said my name like it liked the taste. Evan. I ran again, sideways through the woods, away from the stream, away from anything that felt like a route it could predict. I ran until my lungs felt like paper. I tripped and went down hard, face first into leaves. Pain shot through my knee. The breath left me in a sound that was almost a sob. I lay there, gasping, and listened. No footsteps, no throat sound, just the steady, indifferent noise of the mountains. For the first time all night, the quiet felt like it might be hiding me instead of watching me.
I crawled under a fallen log. An old trunk rotted into a low tunnel that stank like fungus. I wedged myself in, shoulders scraping bark. I pulled the emergency blanket from my pocket and crumpled it dull to keep it from shining. It crackled too loud anyway. I hated that sound. Time passed in ugly chunks. My headlamp was gone. My tent was gone. My food was gone. My keys were gone. Everything I'd packed to make myself feel capable was sitting back in that clearing like an offering. And my phone, at some point during the slope in the fall, was gone too. Then the wrong humming started again. My ringtone, off-key, like someone copying it from memory. It wasn't coming from a speaker, it was coming from the woods itself. I held my breath and counted in my head, because counting is something you can do when nothing else makes sense. 1, 2, 3.
The humming stopped. Silence. A hand pressed into the leaves outside the log tunnel. Pale, mottled skin stretched too tight. Fingers too long. Joints bending slightly wrong. Nails dark and thick. Not claws, just overgrown human nails turned hard. It pressed down slow. Leaves crunched. My whole body locked. My heart slammed so loud I was sure it could hear it. The hand lifted, and something lowered itself to look in. A face hovered at the edge of the tunnel. Not human, not animal. Nose-like bump, mouth-like slit, skin wet in places like it never fully dried. The eyes were the worst. They looked used, like glass doll eyes set wrong, shiny, fixed, no blinking. It leaned closer and pulled air through its mouth slit like it was tasting. The mouth widened slightly. Inside weren't human teeth, broken chunks set in dark gums. It reached one long finger toward me. The emergency blanket crackled as my body trembled. Then the thing's head snapped slightly to the side, like it heard something else. Far away, a human voice shouted. Hello? Real voice. Breath. Strain. Hello? Anybody out here?
My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I wanted to answer. I didn't. The creature froze, calculating. Then it backed away from the tunnel, silent, the hand lifting out of the leaves like it was never there. The distant voice called again, then moved, then faded. In the silence after, I heard that wet laugh again, low, close, between me and where the shouting had been, like it had followed the sound, like it knew how to use it. I pressed my face into dirt until it filled my nose. I don't remember falling asleep. I must have, because the next thing I remember is pale light filtering through leaves and the sound of birds, normal birds. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I moved, and my knee screamed, and my hands stung, and my mouth tasted like dirt and fear. Reality snapped back in. I crawled out from under the log, blinking at daylight like it was too bright. The woods looked harmless in the morning. That made me angry, like the mountains were pretending. I stood up slow and limped. I didn't see it. I didn't hear it, but the watched feeling didn't fully go away. It lingered under my skin like a splinter. I moved uphill because uphill usually meant ridge, and ridge usually meant trail. After a while, I found it, the packed dirt, the way the path felt like a decision instead of randomness. Relief hit so hard my eyes watered. I limped fast, almost jogged. Quartz rock showed up again, the boulder with the white seam, and seeing it twisted my stomach, because it meant I really had been looped, not lost, moved. When I hit the main loop, I saw other hikers, a guy with a dog on a red leash. The dog stopped dead when it saw me, hackles up, low warning woof in its throat. The guy yanked the leash and stared at me like he couldn't decide what I was. A couple in running shorts slowed.
Are you okay? The woman asked. 3 college kids came around the bend, one with a Bluetooth speaker clipped to his pack, music tinny and upbeat. One saw my hands and went, "Dude, you're bleeding!" The woman snapped, "Turn that off," and the kid fumbled, killing the music mid-chorus. The quiet afterward made my breathing feel loud. "I got lost," I said. My voice came out wrecked. The dog kept staring past me into the trees, nose twitching, whining like it didn't like the smell on me. "Bear?" the leash guy asked, half joking, but not really. "No," I said too fast. "No bear." "You're alone?" the woman asked. I nodded. "Sit," she said, and it wasn't a question. I sat on a rock because my legs were shaking. Her partner handed me water. I drank like I'd never had water before. "You got a phone?" the leash guy asked. "I lost it," I said, my voice cracked. Her partner pulled his phone out, stepped higher on the trail, and tried park services. He got through on the second try. When the ranger arrived, he asked questions like adults do when they're trying to keep things from turning into chaos. Where did you camp? How long were you out? Did you see a bear? Did you hear anything unusual? I told him I got turned around. I told him my tent collapsed. I told him I panicked and ran. All true, technically. My mom arrived like she'd driven through her own fear. She hugged me so hard my ribs hurt, then shoved me back and scanned me like she was looking for missing pieces. The ranger asked if they wanted them to retrieve my gear. My mom said yes immediately. My mouth said no. Everyone looked at me. I don't want it, I said too sharp. Just leave it. The ranger blinked. That's expensive stuff, bud. Bud. Wayne's word. My skin prickled. I don't care, I said. Leave it. My mom's face softened in a way that scared me more than her anger. The ranger hesitated, then nodded like he'd dealt with trauma before. Okay, he said. They took my statement. They handed my mom a hiking safety pamphlet like that was the lesson. My mom drove me home with one hand clenched white on the steering wheel. I showered until my skin went red, watching muddy water run down the drain, scrubbing like I could erase a smell. That night, I didn't sleep. It wasn't just fear. My body refused. Every noise in the house felt too sharp. Around 2 a.m., I heard my phone buzz.
From where it should have been, my nightstand. A short buzz, like a notification. Then a longer one, like an incoming call. My whole body jerked. My heart went straight into my throat. I reached, fingers searching the tabletop. Nothing. My nightstand was empty, except for a coaster and a paperback I'd been pretending to read. No phone, because I'd lost it in the woods. The buzzing happened again, anyway, right on the wood, close enough that I felt it in my bones. Then, out of that empty space, a thin, wrong humming started. My ringtone, off by half notes, like someone copying it from memory. I yanked my hand back like I'd touched something hot. My stepdad yelled from the garage, "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't answer. My mom came in and flipped the light on. She saw my face and didn't argue. "What?" she said, already scared. "I heard it," I whispered. "Heard what?" "My phone." She looked at the empty tabletop, then at me. I could tell she wanted to say I was dreaming. I could also tell she didn't fully believe that. She asked what happened out there, really happened. I tried to tell her, but all I could picture was that hand in the leaves and that voice using her word for me like it owned it. So I said the only thing I could say without sounding insane. I think something followed me. My mom stared at me for a long second, then put her arm around my shoulders like she was anchoring me. We sat there, listening to normal house sounds, fridge hum, distant traffic, my stepdad's podcast muffled through the wall.
And in the spaces between those sounds, I kept waiting for tapping, for that wet throat clear, for my own voice saying my name from somewhere it shouldn't be. I didn't hear it again that night. The next morning, the ranger called my mom back. His voice was careful. He said they'd gone to the clearing where I said I'd camped. He said they found my collapsed tent. He said they found my gear. He said my food bag was ripped open and spread out like someone had sorted it. Jerky in a neat line, ramen packets stacked like a kid playing store, my lighter placed on a rock like it was being displayed. He said there were stones arranged near the stream, too, like someone had been busy with their hands. Then he said, "We didn't find your phone." My mom asked if someone had taken it. The ranger paused. "Ma'am, there were marks on the trees around the site, like rubbing, scraping. We see bear signs sometimes, but this wasn't typical. There were impressions in the soft ground, too. Hard to say what from. We'll keep an eye on the area." My mom's fingers tightened around mine so hard it hurt. I didn't hear the rest. Not really. Because all I could think was, it didn't need my phone. It never needed my phone. It just liked the sound it could make with it. And now, it didn't even need the phone to do that.
Let me tell you what I saw in the Appalachian Mountains. Hello all. Originally, I'm from West Virginia. I moved around between the Appalachian and the Midwest some as a kid. Between the ages of 10 and 13, I lived in rural Kentucky in the foothills of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet. I lived with my dad and my grams. We lived in what we call a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac in between a set of foothills. We lived in the middle of the neighborhood with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from us or behind us because of the foothills. When I moved in, my grams had some rules I had to follow. At the time, I chalked them up to hillbilly stranger danger. There were things like don't mess around with the wild animals, don't go out into the woods alone. Then they got a little weird. Don't whistle. If you hear your name, don't answer and don't go to it. And if you see someone in the woods, you might know you didn't, and just come home. This experience happened in August when I was 11. My dad and I had a mowed path through the tall grass and berry bushes to the left of the double wide we lived in. We camped out there a lot because it was close enough that we could check on my grams. Now, when you're in the woods, things are louder than you think. You have animal life, bugs chattering, wind through the trees and grass. There was a stream that ran along the road you could easily hear. That night, we added the campfire to that list. My dad decided to go back up to the house, about a quarter mile, to get more beer and to check on grams. Before he left, he told me not to mess with the fire. After a few minutes of watching the fire, things started to get quiet, like real quiet. The wind had all but stopped, bug and animal sounds were all gone, and the stream sounded like it was miles away. I was getting uncomfortable, even though I've been left at the campground before like this. Then I started to smell and taste it. It was in the back of my throat out of nowhere. This awful metal tang. After a few more moments of dread, my dad came back. He was mad right away, said he could smell burning metal coming up the trail. I told him I didn't, and even pointed to the fire to prove it. He said there was a storm coming in, and we needed to get back home, and he let it go. We left the tent and started our way back. Now, the very cool but very weird thing about lightning in woods this dense is when the lightning hits, it lights everything up like the middle of the day. Well, up until the front of the trees. After the first set of trees, it's pitch black. There are no street lights, and unless you have lights on your property, it's completely black. So it's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than the dim lights from the house windows, there's nothing. I'm eating watermelon, as one does in August in the mountains, when the first clap of lightning hits. Everything is as bright as it can be. After the second passes, it's black as pitch again. Next clap of lightning comes, and that's when I kind of see it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road and the ditches on either side, just past the first line of trees, I could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark. This is also when I can't start to taste that same awful metal tang. I'm not really sure what I saw, so I just kind of stay still. It's a few moments before the lightning hits again. The figure is now closer, standing side by side to the trees. Then it's back again. I'm standing now, not sure what to do. It's been 20 years to this day, and I've tried, but could never fully describe what I saw. This thing's head wasn't proportioned to its body. The arms were too long, and the torso didn't fit right. It was like if you asked a blind person to draw what a person looked like. It just didn't look correct. Once the lightning hit again, the thing is standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to see this thing get any closer, I go inside. My grams is doing dishes and asks why I'm inside. I tell her I think I saw something. She almost immediately gets my dad on his feet, telling him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. My dad, vaguely drunk, obeys. That night, I sleep with her. The next day, we discover the tent door is torn off. It didn't look like an animal. Things weren't cut or shredded, but looked like someone took and pulled it apart. My uncle, who lived a mile or so up, had all 8 chickens killed. heads gone, no blood. The next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. My dad had to be late for work for almost 3 weeks. Anytime I tried to talk about it, I just had the subject change. I just figured I was a kid and it wasn't important or real. It wasn't until years later I finally understood. I was in my early 20s and some cousins were in town for Halloween. As I was telling this story, my aunt gets irate with me, saying, "Don't you tell them that. Don't you put that evil on them." After, I couldn't help but think back on all the times I tried to talk about it and how I was shunned. My kid mind not realizing it wasn't as simple as a subject change, but then actively shushing me. Once I started dipping my toes in Reddit, I realized there was a name for this fucking thing. The same name my aunt had called it that day at the party, and other people have seen it. The Goatman. What bothers me the most is how to this day I couldn't describe any feature, nor have I ever tasted that awful burning metal taste. So friends, if you ever find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky, please remember my Graham's rules. Real story here from southern Appalachia. Not the craziest horror type story, but still scared the hell out of me. In August 2022, I solo overnight camped in the Sumter National Forest up in the far northwest corner of South Carolina. My third and last time ever solo camping out in the middle of the mountains/woods. I feel like I'm a pretty seasoned outdoorsman, and I wasn't that far out to where this would be irresponsible. Anyway, I parked my car on an old logging road and hiked in about 1.5 to 2 miles to the top of a ridgeline that was near an area that had just been cut by loggers probably in the spring that year. I was at about 5 miles from the nearest sign of civilization. I was testing out some new camp gear and just getting some solitude. It was pretty and peaceful and kind of hot and humid. Found a nice spot to set up camp right on the edge of the tree line bordering a grassy area on top of the ridge. The afternoon and evening went by without any issue. I had a cramped 1.5 man size tent and left off the rainfly because it was hot, so it was mostly just netting that sort of let me see out of the tent, but not well. I went to sleep and woke up from a nightmare at 4:36 a.m. I remember because I looked at my watch. The nightmare was me in my tent, exactly where I was, in the exact position I was laying. In the dream, I woke up and looked to my left and saw a large, dark figure with red eyes staring right at me from outside the tent. I woke up for real in a cold sweat and thought, what the fuck? That was fucked up. And maybe a minute after that, I heard a blood-curdling scream that had to be right in the vicinity of my little camp area. I was absolutely frozen in fear. It kind of sounded like a combination of an owl scream and a fox scream, if you can try to imagine. About another 30 seconds goes by that felt like an eternity, still frozen in fear, and then something big, like full sprint, stomped through my campsite. It was 100% bipedal and heavy because I could feel the vibration on the ground. I had a pistol and an AR-15 style rifle with me in the tent, both with weapon lights. I somehow mustered up the courage and grabbed my rifle, unzipped the tent and switched the light on and quickly scanned around with it. Pure adrenaline. I saw nothing, no sign of anything. At this time, there were zero sounds of bugs or critters. And if you know the South, the woods can be loud AF at night. That part didn't even hit me until later on when I was recounting everything, which made me more scared. Anyway, I stayed awake scanning the woods pretty much non-stop until first light and quickly packed up and GTFO'd to the car. What's weird is I have been to this area many times with my brother and friends doing little campouts, shooting, and land nav type stuff for fun, and never ever had anything weirder happen. Not even a weird or off feeling. Always felt safe and comfortable until that night. Since then, I've gone near that exact area again, but no closer than a mile or two, and always had dudes with me for overnight camps. Nothing strange or scary has happened since. I don't know what it was. Some people I've told said it was maybe the Dogman or Bigfoot. I truly don't know, and I don't want to. My brother left to hike the Appalachian Mountains. What came back isn't him. My brother, Kevin, not his real name, I'm trying to keep some anonymity, has always been outdoorsy. Growing up, he would wander off into the woods behind my parents' property and stay out there for hours. He said that being out in nature brought him a lot of peace. A few months ago, things kind of spiraled for him. He lost his girlfriend, his job, and his apartment within 6 weeks. He ended up moving back home with me and my parents to try and get back on his feet. It was hard to see him like that. I mean, he was never someone I would describe as an eternal optimist, but that little spark he always had was gone. This past spring, I found him sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the night. He was picking apart a piece of cold pizza, and it was the first time I had seen him almost eat something in days. I told him maybe he should get back out into nature, take some hikes, or maybe do a solo camping weekend. I said that I had noticed he had seemed down lately and maybe being out in the world could help me get back to himself. In the moment, I wasn't sure if he was really hearing me, but he took a bite of pizza, squeezed my hand, said he loved me, and went back to his bedroom. The next morning, he announced to my parents he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. My mom was hesitant, but Kevin told her that he knew enough about himself to know that sitting at home in his room was causing more stress than if he could go out and just be in the place that made him feel most at ease. My dad just said that as long as Kev checked in every few days or so, he didn't see a problem with it. My dad pointed out that it wasn't like Kevin didn't have the experience. He was a Boy Scout, turned Eagle Scout, turned camping enthusiast. People do that hike all the time, Kathleen. If it were dangerous, no one would be bragging about it. I remember him saying those words exactly. I don't know why they stuck in my head the way they did, but maybe it was the way Kevin seemed to brighten up a little bit after my dad gave his blessing in a sort of roundabout way. The next 2 weeks were spent helping my brother pack what he would need, registering his hike, and buying a plane ticket to Georgia, where he would start his trip. The night he left, our mom was a mess. She kept fussing over him as if he wasn't a full-grown man. She kept asking him if he had everything he needed, and he just kept assuring her he did, and would check in with us once he got to Trailhead. Looking back now, he seemed genuinely excited. If I had known what would happen, I would never let him leave. My brother called like he said he would, just as he was beginning his trip. He even sent a photo in our family group chat that showed him up against a backdrop of purple-blue mountains and lush greenery. He had a thumbs up and his signature slightly off-center smirk. He wrote, "Finally made it. Love you guys. Talk when I get better reception." Over the next few days, Kevin would send a photo or video, usually of his surroundings, but occasionally he would send a selfie with the caption, "Proof of life." But as the days wore on, we stopped getting updates as frequently. What was a text at least once a day became a text once every 3 or 4 days. My dad blamed it on spotty cell reception, which made sense, and it wasn't as if the messages stopped altogether, and from what I could piece together from his photos and short text bursts, he was making good time. It was around a month and a half into his trip when we realized it had been almost 2 weeks without any communication from Kevin. We called the authorities, we gave them all the information that we had, but based on what we knew, it was hard to say he was even missing. As far as the police were concerned, he had gone off-grid with the intent of going off-grid. Sending out search and rescue would cost thousands of dollars, and it could be a waste of resources, especially if there was someone else who needed it.
They said they would put a notice out to the Ridge Runners, and if they saw Kevin, they were told to tell him to contact us. My mom was furious, but I couldn't necessarily blame the cops for their response. We had no evidence to support that Kev was anything but content out in the wilderness. A few days later, a text came through, just a photo of sunset and the words, "Everything is okay here." That began the new normal of communication with my brother. There would be long stretches of time where we would hear nothing, just long enough for my mother to start panicking, and then we would get a blurry photo and a generic caption like, "Look what I saw today," or "Wish you were here." One night, while going through the photos he had sent, I realized in the background of every shot from before we had called the police was a black smudge. It was too blurry to properly make it out, and it didn't seem to be an animal or something caught moving in the camera lens. But after the first photo he had sent after we thought he was missing, the smudge was gone. Kevin came home earlier than expected. He also hadn't told anyone his plans. One night during dinner, there was a loud, sharp knock at the door. My dad got up to answer it, and there was Kevin. His hair was long and stringy. He had grown a patchy beard over his cheeks and jaw. His lips were dry and cracked, and his gums were coated in a dried layer of blood. He was rail thin. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and he wasn't a large man to begin with. His clothes were filthy, caked in mud and debris, and his shorts looked like they had been worn thin at the sole. My mother made a sound almost like a yelp and rushed over to him. The smell coming off him made me gag. It smelled like he had smeared rotting meat under his armpits. My dad just looked at him in shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry and raspy as if he hadn't used it in weeks. "Mom." That was all he could say before he practically collapsed in her arms. I won't bore you guys with everything that happened after that. There was a lot of hugging, some tears, and then a very, very long shower, but something didn't feel right. Kev went to bed pretty much immediately after. He barely even looked at us. The next morning, he ate breakfast with a ferocity that made my skin crawl. He was gulping down huge mouthfuls of food, barely stopping to breathe. My mom just kept piling his plate with bacon, eggs, and toast. He stopped after he had consumed a whole loaf of bread, 2 packages of bacon, and nearly 2 dozen eggs. I tried to ask him about the trip, tried to get him to say anything at all, really, but all I got were grunts and ahas before he lumbered back off to his bedroom. The next few days were more of the same, Kev eating an insane amount of food, sleeping for hours, and then mumbling his way through conversations. It took about a week for him to start communicating like a human being again, but even then it was stilted, awkward, unnatural. He's been home for almost a month now, and something isn't right. His voice, it changed somehow. It's still his voice, but it's like there's a second voice buried underneath it, like someone is trying to harmonize while he speaks. He lumbers around the house like his knees are locked in place, but he refuses to go to the doctors. The worst part is the smell. It still won't go away. No matter how often or how long he showers, he still reeks like death. I could have maybe ignored all of this, maybe blame it on being isolated in the woods for weeks, but after what happened tonight, I couldn't sleep. That feeling of fear in my stomach I felt ever since he's been back hasn't gone away, and honestly, it keeps me up most nights. I was trying to will myself to sleep when I heard the back door creak open. I crept out of my bedroom and down the hall. From my viewpoint, I could see into the kitchen through the window into the backyard. I saw my brother, perched on his hands and knees. He was twitching wildly, like every muscle in his neck and head were spasming. He widened his stance and thrashed his head towards the ground and out of my line of sight. I was worried that maybe he was having some kind of seizure, so I ran out to check on him, and that when I saw it. His head was buried deep into the carcass of one of our neighbor's cats. He was chomping down on its tiny body, blood oozing out between the gaps in his teeth. The thing had clearly been dead for at least a day or so, its body bloated and its eyes were dull and hazy. Kevin reached inside the cat's body and started to strip off pieces of muscle and tendon, slurping them up the same way he had been eating our mother's cooking. Pressing his thumb into the thing's skull, he popped out one of its eyes and tossed it back like a grape.
I ran back into the house and locked the door behind me. I was about to run back to my bedroom when that smell hit me, that horrible death stench that had been wafting around my brother. I opened the door to his room and inched a few feet inside. Wrapped in his bedding were the decaying bodies of 20 or so animals. Rabbits, mice, squirrels. I tried to run to my parents' room, to wake them up, to tell them that we needed to call someone. As I turned around, I saw Kevin in the kitchen window, his body drenched in blood.
He was eyeing me through the glass, his head tilted at an angle that shouldn't be possible. The vertebrae in his neck strained underneath his skin. He lunged at the window, and I screamed. My parents woke up then. They found me in the hallway, sobbing, sweating, shaking with fear. I told them what I saw, and my dad rushed outside to try and, well, I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, but it didn't matter. My brother was gone. We called the police, and they said it sounded like my brother had had some sort of mental crisis. Maybe he had picked up some kind of parasite in the woods that was impacting his brain chemistry. I know they're wrong, though. Whatever that thing is, it is not my brother. My brother left for the Appalachian Trail and never came back. I think whatever that black smudge was in those photos was something that hunted him, and I think it was successful. Whatever that thing was killed my brother, and somehow his body came back home. My brother disappeared, but I am terrified he will come back. My true spooky Appalachian experience. I'm writing this before the sun is up. I just couldn't go back to sleep afterwards. I live in southern WV in a dark, dark holler. I woke up around 4:45 a.m. to a very clear bang, 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 bang that sounded like it was coming from all around the room. Thinking it was my cats, I got up to see what they were getting into. I walked out of the room, and all three of them were sitting up in their beds, ears back, trying to trace the sound. Fiancé is still asleep, so it hasn't woke her up yet. Bang, 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 bang. Is it coming from under the house? Maybe something's got under there and is fucking around. I waited for it again. Bang, 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 bang. Louder this time, accompanied by what sounded like a woman saying something. I checked my outdoor cameras and nothing. It's not coming from my house, but from outside. More bangs followed up by a hey. I stepped out onto my front porch, lit a cigarette, and listened, eyes searching for something in the dark. Hi, a woman's voice from across the way, about 100 feet away from me, near my neighbor's house. Hello? I responded in a confused and apprehensive tone. Oh, I thought you was someone else, said the voice. I still couldn't make out a figure, just the direction the voice was coming from. Is that you making that banging sound? Yeah, it is, and if you don't like it, you can call the fucking law. I sighed and just went back inside to the tune of her banging on my neighbor's door, shouting, Open the goddamn door, you piece of shit! You knew I was coming! I decided to make my coffee and just stay awake. No point in trying to tuck back in. Just goes to show you that if something goes bump in the night, it's probably just your shitbird neighbor having a shitbird guest come over to do early morning shitbird activities. I used to have a house in the Appalachian Mountains, and I have some stories to tell. Recently, I've seen creepy stories of mysterious creatures living in the depths of the Appalachian Mountains blow up on TikTok, so I wanted to share some stories I have when I lived there. So to set the scene, I used to have a house on the Maryland side of the Appalachian Mountains. We were pretty much completely stranded there as the nearest neighbor was around 15 miles away, so we either had to go on huge supply runs to the nearest supermarket, which was even farther away, or hunt for food ourselves. Also, I forgot to mention, my mom always dreamt of going into a house or cabin in the deep woods, so we decided to live there for me and my sister's summer. Anyway, we alternated between hunting and going for supply runs. Now I'll start telling the stories. The first one is when me and my mom went for a hike through the woods and found an abandoned Wild West amusement park called Ghost Town, probably like 20 minutes into the hike. Once we got there, we got a weird feeling that I cannot physically describe with words, like it just somehow appeared in front of us. Then, probably no more than 15 minutes later, we found a huge abandoned hospital. We never knew it for the rest of our stay, but those two buildings were the Ghost Town Village, located in North Carolina, and the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia. We started in Maryland, somehow ended up in North Carolina, and then got to West Virginia and got back to Maryland in less than 2 hours. We stayed surrounded by woods the whole time, not crossing or seeing a single road. That was just the start of the weird shit that happened. The next story is when my mom took me and my sister to a supply run, and while we were driving, we saw a man with a thick jacket, glasses, a balaclava over his face, and a bicycle helmet trying to hitchhike with his thumb out. It was the middle of summer. Me and my sister told my mom to just keep driving, but she pulled over in the road and asked the guy, "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't respond. "Why are you out here dressed like that?" The man finally spoke, but something was off. His voice didn't sound like it belonged to him. It was too high, like it was put through a voice changer. "Ma'am, can I get a ride?" Completely disregarding my mom's question. I looked around him and noticed he had no bike, no car, no hiking stick, no backpack, no nothing, just those clothes. I whispered to my mom to keep driving, and as soon as the man saw that she was trying to drive away, he let out an animalistic, inhuman scream and started to run towards us. My mom floored it to the nearest police station and reported the guy, but they never found him. On our way back to the house, we were on extreme edge, but nothing happened. Then that night, I woke up to a tapping sound on my window and woke up to the same man standing straight up with his hands on the glass. I lived on the second floor. Now, he didn't have his sunglasses on. He also didn't have his eyes. When I noticed it, it immediately fell, and when I looked out my window for it, I didn't see anything. No man, no creature, nothing. Like he just disappeared. I was so shocked and scared, I hid under my covers the rest of the night, even though I was 16 at the time. I peeked my head up occasionally to make sure he never came back. Then, in the morning, I told my mom about it, but it's not like she could do anything about it. The police would never find it, and my parents weren't going out there. This was terrifying, but nothing compared to the next story. I forgot to mention, but we had a dog named Mac. He was a golden retriever and was super friendly and helped us retrieve the animal carcasses when we hunted. One day, I was out hunting with my dad, and we killed a couple rabbits and sent Mac to go get them, but we heard him bark, like he was telling us to go to him instead. We walked over to where he was barking and saw a tree covered with dead, skinned rabbits, each with a shark stick through their head and their eyes removed, with a weird symbol carved into the tree. We were speechless and covered our mouths in shock, and then we heard someone whisper to us, "Hey guys, come over here." We hooked up Mac to his emergency leash and ran as fast as we could to our house. I looked behind me for who whispered to us and saw a man with a huge smile on his face and his eyes as wide as possible for a human to open them, staring at me, and then began to run towards us with a knife. My dad grabbed his hand pistol and shot him in the leg, and he fell to the floor while yelling in pain. Once we reached the house, we called the police and told them about it, and they sent multiple officers to search the area, but found nothing. Not the rabbits, no blood, no knife, no fingerprints, not even the rabbits we killed. For the next couple months, we stayed in a relative's house. None of us felt safe anymore, but my dad, the one who shot the crazy man, was the only one who insisted we stay. Said we could defend ourselves, said it was just another crazy and that we should stay the rest of the summer. We agreed, but said if anything else weird or terrifying happens, we go to our house in the city. Then, the final story is what made us finally move out. One Saturday, I woke up and saw my mom missing from the house. My dad and sister said she was just going on an errand and that she'll be back in the afternoon. Afternoon came and she got back. Nothing else eventful happened that day. Until night struck. We let Mac out. We just thought he was going to go to the bathroom and come back, but we heard him run away deep into the woods like he was chasing something. I don't know why we didn't chase after him, even after our creepy encounters before this. When he got back, he wasn't energetic. He wasn't acting like him at all. He was mopey, sad, and acting really weird. Normally, we would have just assumed he saw something in the woods that made him upset, but after the previous events, we were on edge. Then, when we all fell asleep, I woke up to footsteps coming up the stairs. I peeked out my door and saw Mac standing up like a human, his fur gray, his arms longer than they should be, and his head twisted and upright. His walking wasn't right either. He would walk one step and his body would flop in the direction he stepped. He wasn't walking towards anything either, just roaming the hallway. My heart was beating out of my chest, and I called my sister, and after calling her 4 times, she finally picked up. I don't remember anything I said to her, but what I do remember is sneaking behind the thing, pretending to be Mac, and met up with my sister. Luckily, the rest of my family slept downstairs, so once I met up with my sister, we were able to wake our parents without going past it. Logically, we stayed in the nearest hotel for the night. We had to go back and get our stuff though, so we went back to the house and found it trashed. The food in the fridge was scattered all over the house, and once we got our stuff, we drove away. I looked back to the house and saw the man, the thing in the winter clothes, staring at me. It was the thing pretending to be Mac. We drove back to our city house and never stepped foot into woods again. I saw something terrifying while hiking in rural Appalachia. For context, I am a professional wilderness explorer. Since I was young, my passion had been geared towards the wilderness. I have hiked on rough terrain in many countries. I know the wilderness like it was my own precious child. I research what specific wildlife lives in the area before I go hiking, so I know what to be prepared for. That's what makes this ordeal even more terrifying. One day, while browsing through a travel site for West Virginia, I saw a pop-up for a specific mountain trail. Again, nothing seemed out of the ordinary while researching, and it really seemed like the ideal hiking spot, leading up to a beautiful view showing a gorgeous blue lake. When researching the trail, it was mentioned that the area was very isolated, with the nearest town being 123 miles away. It seemed very enticing. Of course, it had the normal flora and fauna of the region, and it didn't seem odd. It did mention not to disturb the wildlife and to watch where you step because of many false footholds that would break away and cause you to fall down the cliffside. Overall, it's just the normal mountain trail. I spent about a month preparing for this trip. I made sure to contact everyone I knew so they would know where I was in case I went missing. I then drove there and started my hike. Once I got there, I relished at the beauty of it all. The start of the trail had a view of many peaks staring down at you, and I thought to myself how the view looked like giant gods towering over the world. I then started on the trail. At first, everything was fine. It was your typical mountain trail. I made sure I took a break every 15 minutes or so I didn't overwork myself and have to call quits. It was around my 5th break that things started to seem off. The birds had stopped singing, and I couldn't hear the chattering of insects. I didn't even hear the wind blowing through the trees. It was as if everything had vanished. After about 5 minutes, I started on the hike again. I was a little nervous and on edge though, because I was the loudest thing there. It felt wrong, as though I was being watched, stared down by some malevolent force playing with me. I continued until around break number 20. I stopped, getting out my bottle of water as I had done multiple times before, but as I was putting the bottle to my lips, I realized something was off. I heard twigs snapping about 10 feet behind me. I threw my water bottle down and turned around to see what I heard. I can't describe exactly what I saw. That is a bit too difficult. The creature I saw was vaguely humanoid, bipedal, with pale, paste-like skin. Its face, though, was certainly not. It had eyes that I can only describe as being too big to fit its face. Its face, though, small, still surrounded the eyes, but I swear its eyes were too big. The creature's mouth was indescribable, but I think the closest I could use for you to picture it would be to say that it was somewhere in between a human and dog mouth, with 5 layers of knife-like teeth. Its hands were freakishly large, about the size of my arm, with long, skinny fingers to match. About the rest of it, I can't really describe. It was a sort of blur, almost hard to see. That's all I remember about its lower half. I stood still, staring at the thing. It hadn't noticed me yet, but it wouldn't be long before it did. It was then that I started to sneeze, and then the creature really noticed me. It turned its head around,
but instead of attacking me, it spoke. "Anigia," it said, in a deep, guttural voice. "I don't understand," I said, confused, startled by its speaking. It looked at me, pushed its head forward as if to say leave. I then started to run, leaving in fear. I made sure it didn't follow, and I ran till I got to my cat. I recently tried to do research, but I haven't found anything on it. But what I do know is that it spoke in Cherokee. It told me to leave. I have researched the region and have seen that many people have come up missing there. I now think about the human-like sorrow in that creature's eyes, and I think I know why it wanted me to leave.
My first encounter with a skinwalker. I was in the 6th grade when I had my first real encounter with a supernatural creature of Appalachia. I live on a small off-road in the middle of the woods. Only about 13, give or take, houses are on my road, so it's quiet at night. When I was a child in Appalachia, I was taught things to avoid any supernatural confrontation, but it was bound to happen one day. Some rules that I learned were never be out alone after dark. If you see it, no you didn't. If you hear it, no you didn't. Things along the lines of that. It was January, and I had gone over to my friend's house who was about 3 houses away from mine, so not far. But it was winter, and the sun goes down early, and I had lost track of time, and it was 6 and pitch dark outside. When we realized how dark it was already, she offered for me to just sleep over, since she knew there was a possibility of me running into a supernatural creature. But I insisted I just walked home. She then offered to walk me home so I wouldn't be alone. Again, I said no. So I went outside into the frigid, icy air and walked home. I had my phone flashlight on so I could see a creature from far away in an emergency. I walked home as normal, looking at the beautiful icicles and snow piles everywhere, and thought, I'll be fine. I was wrong. My driveway to get down to my front door is steep, and it goes down fast, and at the end is the woods. It's woods for at least 5 miles back. I walked down slowly since there was ice everywhere, and then I heard rustling in the bushes at the bottom of the driveway in the woods. I pointing my flash down, and I saw a wolf, but it didn't look normal.
Living in the Northeast, I see many wolves, but this one looked demented. Wolves won't strike at you or run up to you unless you provoke them, so I thought it would all be okay. I was about halfway down my driveway, and every step I took, the wolf looked more and more demented. It had glowing eyes, and it was very big to just be a wolf. At that time, it started moving towards me, fast. Another rule I learned as a kid was to never run from one of those creatures, but I did run. My front door was locked, but I had a key in my hand. It took me what felt like forever to unlock the key as it jiggled in the keyhole. My anxiety was so bad, and even though it was 20 degrees out, I was sweating like crazy. Finally, the door unlocked, and I ran in. There is a window right next to my front door, and I looked out the door, and there it was. A skinwalker, shape-shifted as a wolf. Its eyes were beady and cold. It was hungry. I looked away, scared of what would happen next. After about a minute, it was gone, never to be seen again. Every night for about 2 months after that, I was spooked to even close my eyes to sleep. It got so bad I had to start taking melatonin. I'm mostly fine now, but here and there, I still feel like this wolf was watching me. It still spooks me to this day. That was my first ever encounter with a supernatural creature, but many were to follow after that one. I had many stories to share about these creatures, but that's for another time.